All right, let's dive into some fascinating stuff today. Prayer and the ideas from the Faith in Action podcast episode, The Power of Prayer, Unlocking Heaven's Potential in Our Lives.
They make some pretty bold claims in this episode about prayer.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just comfort, right? Like they say, it works with great power.
Yeah, and they use James 5.16 to back that up.
Exactly. So they're not just saying prayer makes you feel better, but that it can actually change things.
Right, and it's interesting how they use those biblical examples to kind of drive that point home.
Yeah,
Like the story of Moses, after he encountered God, his face was glowing.
it's an incredible story.
We might not see such a dramatic result, but it does make you think about the impact of prayer on, like, our inner state.
It's a really powerful image, like a physical manifestation of some sort of inner transformation, like something actually changed as a result of that connection.
Yeah, and that raises the question, like, what does it even mean to have your soul strengthened by something? Is that like a psychological effect, a spiritual one, or both?
Okay, so we've got prayer potentially changing us from the inside, but then they take it a step further and talk about prayer actually influencing events. And they use Daniel's prayer summoning angelic help. It's in Daniel 10.014.
Oh, yeah, that's a really powerful image. Prayer acting as a direct line to divine intervention.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think how literally we should be taking these stories, right?
Right.
Are we talking about actual angels? Or could it be more of a metaphor for forces we don't see that are being set in motion?
And that leads to another interesting idea, the concept of spiritual battles. What are those? Are they our own internal struggles? Conflicts with, like, forces we don't understand? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of how we view reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If prayer can influence those battles, it suggests there's more to the world than we can see.
Then the podcast sort of shifts gears and says, prayer isn't just about asking for things, it's about changing us. They use Paul and his thorn in the flesh as an example from 2 Corinthians 12.6 to 4:12. Paul prayed for healing, but he found strength in his weakness instead.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. Sometimes you don't get what you wanted, but you get what you needed through prayer. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh, for sure. It challenges that whole idea of prayer as a cosmic vending machine, right? It's more about growth and aligning with, like, a bigger purpose.
Absolutely. So we were talking about personal change through prayer, and that kind of leads us to what's maybe the most interesting claim in the podcast,
Yeah.
that prayer can lead to supernatural events.
Now that definitely got my attention. They make some big statements, but they don't give any specific examples, which makes it really tricky. What exactly are we calling supernatural here? Defying the laws of physics or something more, I don't know, subtle?
It's a good question. And I think it really depends on, like, each person's views and what they believe.
Right.
Where's the line between, say, coincidence and divine intervention? Something that feels like a miracle to one person might seem totally normal to someone else.
Right, like finding the perfect parking spot right when you need it. Some people would say that's a miracle, while others might just call it luck.
Exactly. It shows how much our own perception shapes our experience. What we believe colors how we see the world, especially when it comes to something like prayer.
So does that mean we sometimes see what we expect to see, especially with prayer? If we believe in miracles, are we more likely to see things that way, even if there could be other explanations?
It's definitely possible. It's like when you're really hoping for something, you tend to notice anything that supports that, even if it's not very clear. It doesn't necessarily mean the experience isn't real, but it makes you think about being objective.
It's a good reminder that even when we're talking about faith, it's important to stay open-minded and consider different viewpoints. We need to acknowledge that it's complex and not jump to conclusions.
Absolutely. Thinking critically is so important, even in a faith context. Blind faith without questioning can be just as bad as dismissing everything. It's all about finding that balance.
So if we look beyond the stuff about angels and miracles, what's the main takeaway here for the listener? What's the core message of this podcast?
I think it's really about finding support and connection in a world that can feel chaotic and overwhelming. It's about tapping into something bigger than ourselves, whether that's a divine being or some universal energy, or even just the collective power of human intention.
And that resonates no matter what you believe. Everyone can relate to needing support, looking for guidance and strength when things get tough. It's interesting how they present prayer not just as something personal, but as a way to make a real difference in the world.
Yeah, it's empowering, right? Like our actions, even our prayers, can ripple outward and affect things beyond ourselves. We're not just watching, we can actually shape things.
So as we wrap up, let's go back to the key takeaways. We talked about prayer as a force for change in us and the world around us, as a source of strength, and a way to get support that goes beyond what we can see or touch.
And even if we leave aside those more extraordinary claims about angels or miracles, the core message is still really powerful. Prayer at its heart is about connecting to something bigger than ourselves, finding meaning and purpose, and looking for support when things get tough.
Yeah, it's something we all experience, that need for connection and meaning. Now, the podcast ends by telling people to start praying, but we want to leave you with something to think about instead. If you could actually talk to a power greater than yourself, what would you say?
It makes you think, whatever your background is. What are your hopes, your fears? What guidance would you ask for? What are you grateful for?
It's a powerful question to consider. Thanks for joining us as we explored the world of prayer. We hope it's made you curious and maybe even inspired you to look at your own beliefs. Until next time.